The interview process. Clearly, it's going to help if there's more than one interview. The question is, how many are you going to have as part of your process? And who conducts them? And because I'm preaching this consistency thing, I believe that if there is a process where the first interview covers X, Y, and Z, and is always the same questioning taking place, it should ideally always be the same person doing it. Of course, it helps. However, that may not logistically always be possible, and there's no reason why, if it's been properly structured, someone else couldn't ask those same questions. The difficulty is they won't have the evidence of others answering those questions to help them. But ideally then, you may have, I'd say ideally you have 3. 1, 2, 3. 1 is very much introductory, very much both sides looking at each other a little bit, setting the scene, as you'll hear in a minute, and developing. I want us to develop a need. They want to come here. This looks to me to be a great place to work. I like what I see. I like what I hear. So clearly you've got to identify what is to be covered in each of the interviews to create and build the desire. And a big step in this, as far as I'm concerned, is that there should then be a link at each stage of the process. Now, what do I mean by a link? I mean that there is something at the end or near the end of this interview which you ask them to do. And the next stage, next interview, the first thing that will happen is they'll ask them for the answer to the link. Why? Why would we want to do that?
Follow a simple request.
Well, yes, and it may not be all that simple, but see that they follow a request. And if they come, well, I haven't had time, oops, that's a really bad answer. But the idea also is that it's seen to be a process. It's seen to me clear that this is expected. The first thing they ask is the last thing they was asked. And it is also good, I think, to actually ask them to do something rather than just be sit back and preached to or sold to, as they might perceive it. And so a link, I'll keep coming back to this, is important. Clearly, what in the interview process we must be doing is probing and pressuring. Don't take trite answers, and I'll come to this later with some of the questions that I'm suggesting. And I reiterate again, consistency is the key. So the first interview is always the same, the second interview is always the same, the third interview is always the same. Telephone interview first. I suggest the first interview is a telephone interview. You speak to them on the phone. If they can't perform on the phone, are they going to be any good to you? Are you going to be able to assess them on the phone with a series of questions? Of course. Certainly you can. And then, of course, you apply, if you like what you hear, the link to come in and see us. And then there are a series of interviews, minimum 2, each with a link. Now, the next one is countermeasures for counter-offers. We do not want to be counter-offered by another operation and taken away. So we actually start that process there. In essence, what you are saying, one of the most important parts of the counter-offers thing, is that early in the interview process, you say, so what would your current employer, or you might say another employer, have to do to make you stay? What would they have to do? And when they're currently employed and seeking to leave, very often the answer is there's nothing they can do. I just want out of here. I want to find something else new. Yes, I know, but if for the sake of argument you're currently earning 30, if they offered you 40 grand, you'd stay, wouldn't you? Well, yes, of course I would. Yeah, well, we know they're not likely to offer 40 grand, but we take it way out of kilter, then we bring it back. So what about 33? Is there any other reason why you wouldn't want to stay there? Yeah, well, I'm not getting any training. Okay, so if they promised you the training and 33,000, would you stay? Well, I'd certainly think about it. Okay. And you've logged that when it's not an issue yet. You've just logged that at the beginning. At the end, you can go against that and say, now, when we first met, you said that I've got to offer you 33 and confirm training for you to stay. So when you hand your notice in tomorrow, you know what they've got to do to do it. Do you see what I'm getting at? Anyway, it's bigger than that, but that's just part of it. Now, what I also believe is that each of you in this process, I'm going to just assume interview 1, interview 2, interview 3. So you're doing the telephone interview, you think this is sounding okay, certainly worth pursuing, and so you give them the link to interview 2. So they're going to go to interview 2, and the key to this is that interview 2 has a clean CV each time. In other words, doesn't have any lead from you at all as to your reactions. Simply see him, see her. Not, I think we may have a problem, or, but don't want to know. I want you to see him, her, absolutely clean, with an interview that is going to be different to the first interview, telephone interview, face-to-face interview. There's a big difference, but the content will be different as well. And then, of course, you pick up the link. So what did he ask the person to do in order to attend the second interview? First thing you do is pick up the link and see what they've got to say about it. The tick box checklist of inputs for each of the stages is simply what are we trying to discover in interview 1, interview 2, interview 3. So just to simplify it, interview 1, telephone interview, we're trying to establish their communication skills on the telephone. Fine. Interview 2 might be, I'm not suggesting it should be, it might include some form of literacy. So we actually ask them to write something. So the link could be to say, write 3 reasons why you think you should join the company. Whatever, I don't mind, but there's something to be written. So we're addressing the checklist of things. So interview 2 is covering literacy. Interview 1 is communication, but of course the others will as well. So in the scorecard for each, communication skills would be on there each time. You must take time to prepare each interview. So just get yourselves together. We know that clients, will sit down and say, right, now then, this is your CV. And they clearly not looked at the CV at all before the person sat down in front of them. You must prepare. What would you think of a client who did that? So you mustn't be guilty of it. Once again, the structure, the content, and the style of consistency is essential. And then you set the scene, you signpost, and you clarify the timing. So, fine. What we're going to do next is you have an interview. The next interview is going to be with Vanessa. She is our blah, blah, blah. She does this here. She will want to give you more information about this, that, and the other, da, 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 da. And we're signposting where we go from here. It's going to take place within the next week, subject to ease of logistically with you, etc., whatever. And we clarify the timing, which is part of the issue that you're talking about. So if he says, oh, God, well, I've got to give an answer to the other people I've seen by tomorrow evening. You won't be able to see me before then, will you? Actually, no, we won't possibly be able to see you before then. So now we've got to handle that objection, effectively, and try and keep them on side. Note-taking and assessment. You will be, won't you, taking notes, probably on the CV, probably on the scorecard, probably on wherever of the interview process that you are doing. You're doing interview 2, so where are your notes? Now, the note-taking is very important for you to be able to retrieve it at a later stage. In other words, don't just listen, try and take some notes as you go of the answers. Why? Because if at a later stage this individual doesn't work out, we've taken them on, they haven't worked out, I want to be able to go back and see what we got at that time and whether there was something we might be able to learn from it. If you haven't got the notes, you can't do that. Probing questions with follow-through. So what I mean by probing questions is you don't accept what is first said to you. I'll give you an answer of a question I'm going to show you later on. So what do you want? Do you want a job or do you want a career? Now, there's an answer that comes out of that. Don't just accept the answer, probe it. Go into deeper into it. What I think you should be trying to do is you should be trying to ask questions that they can't have prepared answers for. They haven't thought all this through in advance. They can't prepare for it because it's a standard question and they've got a standard answer. You're trying to find some questions that are not standard. Make them think. Make them go into a situation where they've got to be original. Role plays. Well, what I've got with role plays is I've got some suggestions of what role plays might be. But I do believe that you could include, in the scenario we've got here, you won't have a role play I don't think you could have in the telephone interview, but you certainly will have a role play in either or both of 2 and 3, different role play in each instance, to try and illustrate and clarify different things. I'm coming back to role plays shortly. I think you've got to put them under pressure. This shouldn't just be an easy ride. This isn't, on the other hand, an interrogation. It isn't an inquisition, but they do have to feel this is just not straightforward and simple. This guy's obviously got his head screwed on, and there must be reasons for these questions. Put them under pressure. At some stage in each of the processes, you need to ask for questions. So have you got any questions that you want to ask of me? Now, I would hope they have. It's frankly a bad sign if they haven't got any questions. I wouldn't say it's a killer, but it's not a good sign. So ask for the questions and see what happens. In terms of setting the task for the link, I'm going to give you some ideas on those shortly, but you set the task before you finish the interview, even if you don't yet know whether the next interview will take place. And you won't know because the next interview sees them clean. The only thing they know is they've passed your interview to go through. And if you have decided no, you, interview 2, may now have conferred with interview 1 to see how we feel about it, but interview 3 doesn't have any feed. Clean CV, clean start, don't be led by previous thoughts about it. Because if you're coming at it from 3 different angles, it helps if you've got 3 different angles coming in on the same subject, then if the same response, not the same response, but the same feeling is generated from 3 different sets of questions about, for the sake of argument, commitment and having to look after a young family, whatever it is, if from 3 different directions it's come in, then it's probably an issue. If it's just one question, it may or may not be the correct question. It may just be that they managed to fool you. Clearly, we've got the opportunity for a scorecard each time. I didn't press it twice. And then you can follow through after the next interview. So let me make that, just if that's not clear to you, I'm saying that you have it clean, you have it clean, you have it clean. You can speak to him after you've seen him and compare notes, knowing what each of you will have covered. But Vanessa can't speak to either of you until she's completed her interview. Then she has access to your stuff. So it's building up a picture totally independently each time. One of the things we've identified is that you have to try and create the desire. And I think one way of creating desire is trying to put them off. Try and make it difficult for them to join the company. How might you do that? What might you do to put them off? Any suggestions? Yeah. If you put something in which could, on the face of it, put them off, then you ask them, so does that make you feel you don't want to come here? Is that a problem for you? And see what their answer is. You've got to make it difficult to attain, which actually your process may well achieve that. Certainly from the time scale it may do. But I do believe also, and I've identified this, you must make them do some work. And actually, there's more work to do from 1 to 2, and more work still from 2 to 3. And if there is, for instance, a final offer interview to take place, like we say, okay, we'd like to offer this person, which may take place, having done meet the family, blah, 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 is a final meeting, if you like, rather than an interview, then there may be some work for that as well. So I believe they have to work for it, and if they don't work for it, it means they're not as interested as they should be, frankly. Confirm their interest. Well, I hope they are saying they're interested, but why? What is it that you've heard? And I used to have this idea, which is the next thing I'm going to suggest to you, and it could be, I suggest, come in at interview 3 of the process we're talking about here, is to say, now, Fred, is there someone who knows that you're looking for work, that you perhaps know that you're coming here today, whose view you respect, whose comments you would value, and whom you might talk about it after this interview is completed? Is there someone like that? Well, yes, I talked to my wife. Okay, or I talked to a guy I used to work for who's been a great mentor, blah, blah, blah. So, okay, so what's their name? So, okay, their name. Now, what I'd like you to do, here's the task. What I'd like you to do, this is the link. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to speak to this person, this mentor, we'll call it mentor, we'll speak to mentor, describe what's gone on so far, describe what your reactions are to this, tell them what your anticipated outcome is, what you think might happen, and then I want you to ask them this question. So I've given you all this information, mentor. Now I'd like you to tell me, please, mentor, why you think this is a lousy idea. Why you think I really should not do this. Now, all too often, the person they're referring to, as a mentor in this case, is simply going to be conditioned by what they tell them. So I think it's a really great company. So the mentor is presumably going to say, oh, good, 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 and I think so too. I don't want to hear that. I don't want rose-tinted glasses. I want them to try and think of something negative. Because the individual, if they're starting to get keen, probably can't think of the negative because their rose-tinted glasses are on. The individual who is the mentor may, and hopefully will, give them some ideas of what is a lousy idea. Why is this a bad idea? What's wrong with this? Have you checked that out? Because when you go to the next interview, the first question is, so did you speak to, I see it was here, Fred, who's a mentor of yours, what was his answer? What did he say? And he said, well, you are a very small company, you haven't got a track record yet. Okay, and what's your answer to that? Well, I said yes, but I do like what I see so far. I said, well, very fair, absolutely fair, but it is an issue, and you do need to think about it. Now, I can answer the issue by telling you that yes, we are a small company, and every big company was once a small company, and every successful company was once a small one. So it isn't just because it's small necessarily a bad idea. But you've also got the benefit of the fact that we are dynamic, we're quick, we're fast on our feet, we're quick moving, and we are getting somewhere very quickly in a highly competitive market, stuff. But get them to feedback why it's a lousy idea rather than just a good idea. You need to have given them absolute clarity as to the deal, financial and non-financial, versus the current package. Now, if you haven't got the information about what the current package is, and in terms of the rec-to-rec, and in terms of an outside application, verified current earnings, because there's no reason why you shouldn't ask a direct application to bring along to their, in this case, second interview. So one of the links could be from the telephone interview. Right, well, when you come through to the second interview, bring your latest pay slip with you. Okay? And do they? No. Why didn't you bring it with you? Now, either it means, I would probably push them on this, either it means you're telling porkies, or you can't find it. Now, porkies, not good news, can't find it, disorganized. So which is it? Now, you know, we're putting them on the spot here, and perhaps making them feel uncomfortable. But they were asked to do something and haven't done it. So they need to know, I mean business. We are very happy, I suggest, to say, look, I want you to check for yourself that we're absolutely open here. We don't have any problem about you asking existing employees about how it works, what it's like to work here. We've got nothing to hide. If you want to go out in the office after this interview and just go and talk to someone, anyone, pick them at random and just have 5 minutes with them, I have no problem with it. So they can see that this is really, genuinely an open book. Let's give you some ideas of what questions we might ask. You've probably got your own favourite interview questions that you use often or always. This is not a definitive answer, this is just some ideas. A very blunt question. Why are you here? Well, I'm looking for a job. Yeah, but here. Why are you here? What is there about here? Do you see what I'm doing? I'm probing what is an easy answer. And probe it and find out more about it. Well, I like what I see so far. What particularly do you like so far of what you see? What appeals about what you see so far? So we're probing and we carry on until we get satisfied in our own minds that that's the genuine answer and that they're capable of working under a little bit of pressure in giving their answers. What things are most important to you? What typical answers might we get? My family, my work-life balance, my earnings, my future. Could all be perfectly normal standard answers to it. What are we going to do? Probe them, absolutely. Why are your family the most important? Well, it's obvious, isn't it? My family is the most important. Yes, but are your family more important than your career? Yes, fine. So if there's a choice between the two of coming into work on Sunday because there's an event that we're trying to organise on, and it's Sunday that we can do it and we can't do it another day of the week, because it's going to be a family day, would you feel uncomfortable about doing it? No. So it isn't then ultimate family, it is for family in terms of earning and working and developing a career to help my family rather than my family dictates everything. Or more likely, my wife dictates everything. She says I can't come on Sundays, whatever. Okay, probing, finding out more about it. Just finding out how they tick. I mentioned this one earlier. Do you want a career or a job? This is something I used to ask right from the word go. Now, clearly, anybody with an ounce of intelligence would guess what the right answer is, wouldn't they? Which is? Career, yes. Now, okay, so you say career. Therefore, Fred, you clearly see a distinction between a career and a job, otherwise you would have not been able to answer the question. Yes, I do. So you believe that a career is more important than a job, yes. But isn't a career a series of jobs, Fred? Well, yes. So what's the difference between a career and a job? What's a career got that a job hasn't? Push them at it. And ultimately, we hope we'd get out of it. Well, career is thinking long term, job is thinking this month's paycheck or whatever it may be. And get them working out why the career is the right answer and see whether you believe what they're telling you or whether they're just giving you the trite, I think you'd like to hear this answer to it. And often people, particularly, dare I say it, the graduate type, inexperienced type of interviewee, finds it quite difficult, and actually in finding it quite difficult to clarify their thinking that career is the right answer and why is it the right answer, actually, again, gets them thinking, God, this guy knows what he's talking about. No one's asked me that before. I can see there is a difference, and he's helped me find out what that difference is. Like that. One of the things that can happen is that in interview 2 and interview 3, there might be the same question deliberately and see whether you got the same answer with a different interviewer asking the question. Equally, I explain to the interviewee, now I'm going to ask you questions, and it may be that you've already been asked these questions because we don't confer until after we've seen you. So I don't know whether you've already been asked this question before, Fred, but equally, you may have asked a question of first interview and got an answer. You might want to ask it of me to see if you get the same answer. So it's a two-way opportunity for them to see that we are absolutely open about this and we are not duplicating, we're trying to increase the level of knowledge. Now this is a pretty important question. Don't worry about the numbers, just concentrate on the concept. Would you prefer a 20K salary with an on-target earnings potential of 35,000 or a 28K flat salary? Now, what would we, do you think, like to hear as the answer to the question? Sorry? 20 with the upside on it. Because, which I think is the right answer, we want to see that they've got the vision, if you like, of seeing the upside and the potential of it and some confidence that they can achieve it. Now, if they say, oh, 28K salary, why? Why wouldn't you want the chance to get 35,000? Oh, because I've got mortgage, blah, 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 and they make a justification why they need that regular guaranteed income to do it. In which case you know that there is a risk that they're not going to be financially motivated. I don't say they have to be, but if they're not, then a lot of the things that we tend to do are not going to work for that individual. And so it's quite an interesting, after having probed it, element of finding it out. Now, clearly the numbers that you put in need to be realistic for the level that you're talking about to the individual, but just make the point of upside or flat, somewhere between the two. Question. Who is the most admired previous boss that you have, and why? What did they do that you really admired? What did they not do that you really admired? And similarly, who would you say was the least admired previous boss, and why? This should give us, if we're taking notes of what their answer is, some clue as to how they're going to be best managed, and what things they clearly value and what things they clearly don't like. And so long as they fit with how we handle our staff, then that's a good indication. Some more questions. You have 3 minutes to write down why we should employ you in this job. Just throw it at them, straight like that. Paper, pen, go. Clock, go. 3 minutes. What am I doing? I'm putting them under pressure. I'm asking them to clarify, literally, with literacy and literally, what it is they like so far. And they've got to do it to a time frame, so they're put under time pressure. And then you critique what they say. This could be, for instance, always in interview 2. And you get your feedback from it. And you, after having asked 30 people to do this, and you've kept, of course, what they've written, and it's there in the file, you've got some sort of indication of whether the question was actually a good indicator or it didn't work out. When did you last lose your temper? What's that got to do with the price of marbles and recruitment? Why is it a fair... well, perhaps you don't think it. Why do you think it's a good question to ask? Do we want people who've never, ever lost their temper? I actually found it quite a useful question to ask because, first of all, they had to think about when it was. And typically, of course, they don't often lose their temper, but there almost has to be something. And push them and say, what do you mean you'd never lost your temper? Come on. Must have been something that really got up your nose somewhere, somehow. Was it road rage? Did you not, when the chap cut you up on the roundabout, did you just say, all right then? Next one, I was typically conducting the penultimate interview with role plays in it. And often this would be 1.5 to 2 hours interview. And at the end of what I was doing, I'd say to them, okay, Fred, so since you came through that door, what is now nearly 2 hours ago, do you feel now less keen, more keen, or as you felt when you came through the door about the possibility of joining the company? So less, more, or same? Answer more. Why? What is it that I've said that makes you feel, I mean, you were keen when you came, it's very, but what's made it even more keen? Find out what it is that's tickled them, pleased them, liked them. Well, I think I'm just as keen as when I came through the door. So there's nothing I've said at all in the last 2 hours that has made any difference to your perception of this job. Like, that's actually a bad answer, really. But I want him to tell me, well, no, because I was so keen, I couldn't be more keen, and I'm still more keen. No, you haven't changed a thing. Don't like that too much. You're less keen. Ah, okay. So what is it that I've said that's made you feel less keen than when you came through the door? What's turned you off the idea a bit? Has it turned you off the idea that, in fact, if we offered the job, you would decline? Probe it, find out about it, see where it takes it. But if you have spent a considerable amount of time going through a process, then it should have had some impact on that candidate, and that question gives us some indication of what their impact has been. So that's that one. Since we've met, are you more likely? Yeah, fine. How do you seek to achieve a good work-life balance? That, of course, is making an assumption that they'd want a good work-life balance. You could say, or don't you care? Do you just want to get the money? Find out what makes them tick. What we're trying to do is just get behind the facade that might often exist in an interview situation. I'm presenting what I want you to see of me, not necessarily what I am. Now this one, it's a great favourite of mine. It takes a bit of explaining. It's called the dinner party. And it would come in the sequence we've talked about here, very much towards the end of the third interview in this case. And what I'd say is, okay, Fred, well, I want you to imagine, if you will, that you at home, now at home, you've got a partner, wife, or what? Oh, my wife, okay. And her name is? Jean, okay. So I want you to imagine, Fred, that you and Jean are going to give a dinner party. Is that possible? Is that something you do? Oh, yeah, okay. You're going to give a dinner party. Now, I want you to imagine that this dinner party is going to contain some really good, long-standing friends or relations. So let's start off with, do you have any siblings? Yes, I've got one brother, okay. And his name is John, okay. Now, do you see a lot of John? Yes, I see a lot of John. So each other's houses? Yes. They live locally? Yes. Is he married? Yeah. What does he do? Is he older or younger than you? ... Get this information down. Okay. So your dinner party is going to consist of you two plus John. Now, who's your best friend? Probably Janice. Okay. Best friend is Janice. Fine. So how long have you known Janice? How old is Janice? What does Janice do? Do you see a lot of her picture? Getting a picture now. Now, however unlikely it may be, Fred, maybe even impossible, you're going to invite your mum and your dad to this dinner party. Well, they're both dead. Okay, sorry about that, but let's assume for the moment that they are still alive and they come to the dinner party. So, what did your dad do? Did your mum work? Was she a housewife? So just get a bit of a picture of the background to this. Now, this you might say sounds very intrusive, but you'll see where it comes from in a minute. Okay, so, okay, we've got then you and Jean, I've got to remember the names now. You've got your sibling John, best friend Janice, and your mum and your dad. So that's in fact 6 of you. You might extend it. I don't suggest having any more than 7. But you need now, just to backdrop and take it away from his expectation or anticipation or perception of what this is about, people who know him well. People with whom he has had interrelation for some time. And we need to know who and what they are, what their sort of background is, to feed this in. Okay, close it back in. Okay, Fred. Now, I want you to imagine this dinner party goes on. Would you be offering wine at this dinner party? Would you have a few? Oh, yeah. Or, no, we're very teetotal. Right. Tells me something. I might not agree with it. You don't smoke, but you do have a drink. Fine. I like to just hear whether it is, oh yeah, not half, we'll get rat-arsed, or is it something where, no, we are very controlled about this. We don't like to have too much. My wife, Jean, was it? Doesn't like too much. Okay, this is telling me something about him. It may not be positive, may not be, I just give him a bit more picture. Okay, fine. Well, anyway, I want you to assume that yes, we do very happily have some wine. Well, okay, Fred, the wine has flowed, everyone's feeling very happy, very relaxed, chattering away, it's all going swimmingly well, you've done the meal now, and you're going to go out, shut the door from the dining room and go into the kitchen to get the coffee. And in the room, all these good friends and relations of yours love you to death, but the conversation effectively is, Fred, he's such a super guy, but. Now, let's just go through them. We wouldn't go to the wife first, let's go to brother. What does John say? He's a great guy, but what's the thing that John, what about you do to irritate John? What does John not like about you? And probe it a little bit, find out about it. Well, he thinks I'm terribly disorganized. Disorganized what? Socially? Yeah, I forget appointments that I've made to go and see him for lunch or whatever it may be. Okay, so I take it then John is very organized. Oh God, he's absolute anorak. Terrible. Okay, so we can assume that he's probably the other way, but he's nevertheless identified that what? This guy may not be as organized as we might like him to be. Not a killer, but information. So what about your good friend Janice, whom you've known, I see you said, since you were kids together. What does she say about you? I mean, why did you get married to her? What would she say? No, no thank you. What's the problem with you as far as Janice is concerned? And we probe it and get information out and jot it down. And we go through each of them, and mum and dad. What are we doing take it out for the moment. We're talking now, you and I are talking. What are we doing? What is this establishing for us? Yeah? But what particular bit of the profile? Sorry, I think you said the word. Weaknesses, yes. Now, if I said to Fred, tell me what are your weaknesses, what am I going to get? This actually achieves it endlessly. I've proved it endlessly. It's silly almost, but it does nevertheless. He's prepared through other people to tell me what his weaknesses are, because it's them saying it, not him saying it. Now, that I've just clarified and explained to you, because we go all through this and we get to the stage where I say, well, okay, Fred, let's just bring this to a conclusion. You're thinking of joining the company. You're hoping that we might offer you the job. You've identified that you're still very keen. Why would we want to employ someone who is disorganized, who is dumb and dumb and dumb, picking the negatives out? Why would we want to do that? Now, he's now got to, if you like, justify or explain how it is that those weaknesses are not an issue for us employing him. And he does or doesn't do a good job on explaining that to us. And then, key question, okay, Fred, so why do you think we've spent now 10 minutes talking about this mythical dinner party? What's the point of my doing that, do you think? Now, should Fred be able to identify what you've identified straight away there, Steve, is, well, you're trying to find out my weaknesses. Well, why didn't I just ask you what your weaknesses are? Why wouldn't I do that? Well, I probably wouldn't tell you. Thank you. So do you see what I'm getting? I'm finding out where this guy's got something up here, and a sensitivity and an awareness of what's going on. And the dinner party, although it's convoluted and although it's possibly, I don't really believe that it is intrusive, it is very, very revealing. And once you've done it a few times and you yourself have become more fluent in how you address it and know how far you can push the information that's coming in, and perhaps where something pretty derogatory has been said, let's say that he's disorganized, well, he would say that, wouldn't he? Because John, you've explained, he's a control freak, he's an anorak anyway, so he would say that, wouldn't he? So I'm softening it out so he doesn't feel too bad about it. Do you see what I'm getting at? So, but only when you've done it a few times do you start to get the feel for that. But it's an incredibly valuable and revealing questioning to go into a set part of which interview, always done, what's the feedback, lots of notes, be able to retrieve them. And we'd see whether the predictive behavior that it's identifying in fact came out. Okay, role plays. Now, clearly the first one that's possible is a telesales scenario, which could be taken in the telephone interview. Now, in fact, what we used to do was that we had, this was at Select, we did have a telephone interview, which was simply just to find out whether the person could explain who they were and were they even a starter or not out finish. But then, when they came in for their first interview, at some point in that interview, we set up a role play, which is, okay, well now I want you to imagine, Fred, that we're now going to be on the telephone together. I'm a client. Now, he's not had any experience with recruitment, doesn't know what, I mean, he knows what a client is at this stage, or if not, we have to explain it. I'm a client, and I want you to imagine that you are indeed a consultant. And here's the scene, and we set a scene. For the sake of argument, he's got to sell us his service, which is pretty bloody difficult for someone who hasn't done it before, but you've got to set this up for yourself. And I say, okay, so you're now going to phone me. My name is Romney Rawls, and I want you to speak to me as a client on the telephone, at which point I swung round in the chair and presented back to him and said, right, we're on the phone, so you can't see my face, you can't see my facial reactions, and this is therefore much more like it's going to be on a telephone, and I just explain why I've turned around, and then go. I'm just not interested. I'm sorry, we've got plenty of recruiters who work for us at the moment, we're not interested. Sorry, are you still there? You know, I'll just wind it up a bit. But I'm doing something to get some sort of role play going of what it's like on the telephone, how inventive can it be. In a graduate, no experience, you clearly got to make it a bit easier than I would just have done. But that's for you to sort out and set up. But then having set it up, it has to be always exactly the same. So the introduction to the scene that I set always has to be, I mean, it's a script. I hope you wouldn't read it as a script, but I know that every single one of the people who've taken that role play had exactly the same input. And therefore, if someone says, oh, I didn't, you didn't say that. Oh, yes, I did. Everyone else picked it up. You didn't. Yeah? Then we want a recruitment scenario. So we would identify something specifically in the process that we go through, either with a candidate or with a client, or with both, so that you can imagine that your potential employee is dealing with both, so he can have the candidate face-to-face and perhaps the client on the phone turned around, so you work out what you're going to do. So a scenario could well be, for instance, that the interview with the client of the candidate, which has been set up by the consultant, has taken place, and this is now a debrief from the client of what he felt of the candidate. And effectively, for the sake of argument, the client is saying, I don't think so. Could you explain why not? What was the problem? What particularly did you not? I mean, would they pick that up? Would they go in for that? Okay. And for the sake of argument, well, he just didn't seem to me to be terribly committed to the type of work that we do. Very well, okay. Can I clarify what sort of questions there were that you asked to identify that? Well, yes, I said to him, do you know what animal husbandry means? And he said no. Well, how would you know you don't like to do it? I want, whatever situation I've set up, I want the potential consultant to try and see how he can turn what is a no into a possible yes, and how he might deal with it with the candidate. How would he put it to the candidate? Sorry, Fred, no go. Don't think so. Fred did very well. He liked you a lot, but I don't think he's going to offer you the job predominantly because... See how he handles the situation. Now, the candidate says, well, that's not fair. I mean, play it up, wind it up, so that you always have the same sort of reaction of your candidate, of the candidate that you identify in the role play will always be the same type of candidate with the same sort of reaction, same short fuse, same whatever it may be, client ditto. So there is a consistency, even though clearly there will be different wordings coming out from your individual consultant, potential consultant, of the candidate. So that's a recruitment scenario. So that might give us some indication, for instance, of their empathy, of their depth of thinking, of their trying to work out how to make a sales opportunity out of what is potentially a no-go situation. Which then brings me to the next one that we used to do. And in fact, this was in my interview. You have to remember that this was in the mid-80s, so we're talking 30 years ago, when smoking was a lot more prevalent and acceptable than it is now. Nevertheless, having myself before then smoked quite a lot and having given it up, I was, of course, the archetypal hate the stuff, can't stand it, filthy smell, rotten, bad for your breath, bad for your health, what do you want to do that for, type of approach. So that's just to give you a setting the scene. Clearly the ashtray is not the way of doing it now. I'll give you an idea what might be now, but just let me play you through what happened then. Effectively what I said to them was, okay, now I want you to imagine this scenario, Fred. You are a commission-only salesman. You only live on the commission that you generate. You generate commission from selling a product. You can get as much of that product as you like, as quick as you like. You can use your imagination, total imagination, create whatever you like out of this thing. But essentially what you've got to do, it is now the 28th of the month, there's 2 days to go, and you're not going to be able to pay your rent at the end of this month. So if you don't close a sale pretty damn soon, you are in deep trouble. What am I doing? I'm setting up a need in the situation of seeing me. Now you're seeing me, Fred, as me. I'm Romney Rawes, I run a recruitment company, you've managed, God knows how, to get an appointment to see me, but I don't know what it is you're seeing me about. You're about to tell me, and I haven't got a lot of time. Your product is something, therefore, that you've got to sell, and you can buy for £1. Every one of them costs £1. Sell them for what you like, be as creative as you like in making this product do whatever you want it to do, but you've got to get some rent soon. Okay? And I then handed them what we used to have as a sort of beer mat, which had select appointments written on it. It's a coaster, if you like, select appointments on it. And I say, now, I want you to regard that as your product, but it isn't your product. That's just what you can handle, if you like. Here's my product. The product you have is an ashtray. Go. The first thing I would do is to make it absolutely clear to him, as soon as he mentioned this is an ashtray, listen, I'm sorry, stop there. I hate smoking. I think it's the most revolting habit in the world. I hate the smell, blah, 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 blah. Like dead in the water, don't try and sell me an ashtray. Does that mean it's the end of the game for them? Well, they've got to keep going. How do they keep going? Now, what we're looking at here is developing sales ability or sales awareness, or even, dare I say it, the gift of the gab, to actually not just grind to a halt at that point. But they've also got to think, I've got to make rent. I can buy this thing for £1. How many of these have I got to sell to make some rent? Loads, and he doesn't even want to buy one. How am I going to do this? And we were able effectively to quantify the success of people in this role play, because it was how much did they make at the end of the day. When I tell you that one person made £4,500, how could they possibly have done that with that scenario already in place? What could they have done? Give me some ideas. It's not easy, but come on.
They made up marble.
Yeah, but I still don't want an ashtray.
I know, but you can break down the marble and resell that at £500 a pound.
I can. I'm the client.
I'll break it down for you.
You break it down for me by tomorrow evening.
By tomorrow evening.
Okay.
You know what? I'll give you a discount, £480.
For one ashtray.
No, for £1 of marble.
£1 of marble.
And it's retailing at £1,000.
And you give me a discount at 500. Okay. He's thinking along the right lines. A, he's got to wind this up, because, you know, selling me 3 ashtrays, even if he did it, isn't going to make any money for him unless he's selling it at a huge price. So one option is to sell it at a huge price. What is the other option? How does he sell volume when I don't want the bloody thing? What need could there possibly be for an ashtray that I don't want? Now you're getting there. What was this that I gave him? I gave him a promotional gift to use. And the secret of it was, we can get this emblazoned with your thing. Now, even if you don't like smoking, Mr. Rawls, you can see that this one has quite a lot of depth in it, so it can be used to put pens in, it can be used as a coaster for your coffee cup, it can be used for your wine glass, and he was just being creative in working out how this might be. Although it's ostensibly an ashtray, it could also be other things, but the main thing was it's going to promote your company. It's going to say something about your company. And so if you will take 5,000 of these from me, I will do them. And he just worked it out. Now, that was hugely unusual. Most people made 20 or 30 quid if they got anywhere at all. But the key to it was, I'm making them think on their feet about something which on the face of it is no thank you, which is not a lot unlike recruitment in many respects. So they've got to think on their feet. These are people who have no previous sales experience, let alone recruitment experience. Can they think this through? Now, the fact that they only made 3 quid on it didn't mean they didn't get their rent, didn't mean they didn't get the job, but I wanted to see how they got on with it. And after I'd done that, as I had in the end, by about 2,000 people I'd given this thing to do. I mean, I've had people coming up, 10 years ago, so I remember you asked me to sell you an ashtray, so-and-so. I remember it because it was such a zany and difficult thing. And what has this got to do with an interview, a recruitment interview, and asking to sell an ashtray? And the people remembered it. But what it did do, again, it helped wind up. God, this is different. This is a place that has something in it that's exciting, better. And it worked very well. Somewhat more arcane. Try to interest me in your favourite hobby, if you will. What's your favourite hobby? You ask them. Bird watching. come on, interest me in it. Well, you may not like birds. No, I don't. Well, I do like birds, and I like watching birds because birds are hugely interesting characters. They've got so many useful things to learn, for us to learn as human beings. I mean, has this guy got some ability to be passionate about something he does know about? Football, golf, whatever his hobby is, can he really wind up in me? And I, of course, I hate ball games. I prefer team games. I don't like this individual stuff. I just play the game with him, making it more difficult for him, but just see how he gets going. Can he show me some passion? And can he develop some emotion and empathy? Yes. And I use the phrase in a lot of my stuff of articulate fluency. So is he articulate, and is he fluent in the way that he puts it across? And this is of something that he's not prepared for in advance, unless he's answered that question before. So it's a good question to try and establish whether there's some passion in there. So those are just some ideas. I'm sure you've got your own favourites. All I'm saying is that you need to structure them into your process. You need to identify, if you're looking for these competencies, if you're looking for these personality traits, how are they going to be evidenced in these various bits, so you can get your scorecard set up to identify how they did against each of those and whether that starts to work up a process for you. We now have the offer process. After each interview, we should pre-close. Okay, well now that's the end of the interview for today, Fred. I've given you what I'd like you to do for the next interview that you go to. But tell me, as it stands at the moment, if we were to offer you the job as you understand it and as you see it at the moment, would you be happy to accept it? Would you bite my hand off? Would you say, I need to know more? What would be the answer? No, I need to know more. Well, what sort of things might you need to know more about? I mean, this is standard recruitment stuff anyway, but we're applying it for ourselves. So we pre-close each time. As far as we're concerned, we are only able to offer once we have all conferred. So we've got feedback from that, feedback from that, feedback from that, scorecard on each of those, comparison, how's it standing? Did you find him a problem with that, but you didn't? How do they stack up? Do they all say, doesn't sound as if he's going to be very passionate, he's very sort of flat. Okay, does that matter? Is that essential? But you have a debriefing once you've all seen him. As I've explained, you don't do it until each of you have seen the last one. We need to clear any issues, theirs and ours. We need to get these out of the way because we need to know, for instance, if this guy's in a recruitment business at the moment, are there any contractual restrictions? And if there are, as there usually will be, have we seen them? Do we understand what it says? How long does it apply for? What's the distance? Whatever. And beware, some of your competitors, I'm sure not you, so don't worry about that. We don't take any notice of that. Right, so you don't take any notice of contractual restrictions that has been applied to an existing employment. One has to therefore presume that you don't expect them to be taken seriously when you apply them as well. Not a good signal. And equally, it's something where, unless you've actually gone into the detail of it, you might be buying yourself a lot of trouble if they are particularly litigious on the other side, if you let them loose. You might say, yeah, okay, we are very happy to abide by whatever restrictions you've got. We will honour them. We want you to honour them. We don't want this to be a bad scenario for you or for us. You have a restriction for 6 months, so for 6 months that's not going to be an issue. Now, just as a quick aside, never please take someone on only for the business they're going to be able to bring you from their existing clients. Never do it. A, rarely does it actually happen. B, it can cause an awful lot of mayhem and problems for you and be very expensive. And C, if that's the only reason you're taking them on, how do they feature in all the other things that you're checking out on? Because they've got to tick all the other boxes for this to be something that you're prepared to ignore. So we've cleared them, we've got the restrictions covered, and then we want to offer the job. The written offer is only to confirm, in my view, it's only to confirm an already agreed deal. We've made the offer verbally, We've clarified they're happy to accept it. We've clarified they've got no further questions. We've gone through the counter-offer situation. So what's going to happen if you go back and hand in your notice? What have they got to do to keep you? You remember when you first met, you said they've got to be 33,000 a year and the training? Well, if that's going to happen, then you might stay, might you? Oh, no, because what you've told me is much better. Good, like to hear that. But I'm asking the questions and I'm taking it back. So I'm playing the counter-offer scenario through. But effectively, I'm not going to go to the trouble of writing a formal offer letter to see if he's going to accept it. I'm basically writing a formal offer letter to confirm what he's already accepted. And until and if he has accepted it, then the offer letter goes out, in my view. And in any event, the offer letter is always subject to references. We must reserve the right to speak to the existing employer, who we can speak to once notice has been given. Now, ask, is there likely to be a problem? You go and hand your notice tomorrow. Is your current boss likely to give you a good reference? Well, I should hope so. My last appraisal was very good, etc., etc., etc. Good, fine, okay. Well, we'd hope so too. Oh no, he's very vindictive. Last two people who left, he tried to give them bad references when they were asked for. So I'd rather you didn't speak to him. That's not going to stop me speaking to him, but I now know what I can expect when I speak to him. And I hope I might be able to ask a few questions which would drill down under the resistance of them going to me from him into, was there really an issue under there, or is he just miffed? Which is up to us to be able to carry out that call through. And then, I've already identified it. I want you to file all the inputs through the process that you've got for future retrieval, if necessary, and for later review. Because in time, we've taken these people on, in time we'll know whether they worked out well or not, and in time, we'll come back to it, you might find that very helpful. Complete the referencing. It's been subject to references, but still on the counter-offer scenario, we need to go through the completion of that in terms of making sure the resignation has taken place, that we've got the signed deal of acceptance of our offer, and we have an agreed start date, and we have an agreement as to what happens contractually in the meantime. Is this person going to go on garden leave? What are we going to do during the garden leave? How are we going to handle that? What do we do, if anything, whilst garden leave is taking place? But we complete the counter-offers measures whereby we are trying to ensure there is no chance of him being turned back or taking another offer, because that's all part of the counter-offer scenario. It's not just from the current employer, it can be from other offers, which we try to handle by pre-handling it. You then, of course, have got to set up the induction process. Now, you have an induction process, I presume. If I arrive joining you on day one, there is a standard, isn't there, procedure that I'm going to go through. Things that you will make sure you cover, things that you make sure you give me, things that you make sure I understand, etc., etc., etc. Is that part of your formal, structured process? It needs to be the same every time. It needs to be able to tick all the boxes off so that no one gets to day two without having been through the same as everyone else who's come through to day two. So that it is part of this structure. Same thing again as before. There will probably be a probationary period and review process that you're going to build into your offer, in all likelihood and all probability. How do you assess them during the review? Do you wait to the end? Do you go on a monthly basis to update them? How you're doing? What's happening? Is it only going to be figure related? Is it KPI maxed up? Where are we going on this? Is it consistent? Again, I come back to it. Is it consistent? And of course, we've got to ensure that there is then thorough and consistent training available. Now, it's probably going to be consistent if it's you, always you, who carries it out, but it should be thorough. Just because you've got a really busy week this week and you've got a newer person joined, they shouldn't have and can't have less of an input from you just because you've got a busy week, which I know is impossible, but that's what you've got to aim for. Okay, we've got them on board. They're working with us. They've been through their probationary period. They've survived so far. but it still doesn't work out. It doesn't work out because, obviously all sorts of reasons. I think what you've got to do is you've got to learn to fail fast, by which I mean, effectively, you've made a selection mistake, clearly, because it's not worked out. You've selected them, it's not working out. So you've made a selection mistake. And within reason, given that you've done everything with this individual that you've done with everyone else that's worked out, then sooner you make the decision, the better. We alluded to this right at the beginning, where the rest of the staff couldn't understand why on earth he didn't get rid of Fred. I mean, he never did any work, he was never here, whatever. Learn to fail fast. You failed, fail fast. The longer it goes on, the more it costs you. More, your credibility is often undermined with the rest of the staff. Clearly, you should be able and should conduct some form of exit interview to find out how it went wrong, why it went wrong, what their feelings are about it. And that's either way, if they've decided to leave or you've decided to push them. So whether it's a push or jump. I've already alluded to the fact it might be interesting to get feedback from other members of the staff as to their comments, and I would again do it individually, not as a group. Fred's left us. Anyone got any ideas of what the problem was? No. I would now want you to review the hiring notes and assessments that you made when you hired Fred, because you've made a selection mistake. Is there something in there that might have indicated what we now clarify? Were there some clues that we failed to spot or failed to react to? So is there in fact a lesson to be learnt from Fred's departure? Do you need to make any changes or improvements to the process that you've put in place? Don't regard it as set in stone forever. There may be things that you could improve and change to good effect. So, I come now finally just to an action list. What could you adopt or adapt for improving your staff selection methodology from the stuff that I've given you? A lot of the stuff you do in a different way or you do your way wouldn't fit, not a culture consistent or whatever, but I would hope there's some things in there that would help you make a better stab at it, and if nothing else, to have a structure and a consistency through that structure. So I believe that you should spend some time building the model and then apply it religiously. And then you constantly review and measure. I asked you right at the beginning, analyze your last 12 months hires and leavers, what is all, keep that rolling, keep that updated, and see if there's any lessons that come through for it.